Welcome to the Republic of Middle-Aged Men. I'm your host Tim, and once again joining me today is Lachlan.
Hey guys.
And Ruben.
G'day.
Good evening, gentlemen. Today, I will go first. Today, I am drinking a bottle of Coonawarra, the Advocate Cab Sav. Not the whole bottle, but that's what I'm drinking.
That's what you started with.
It is. What are you drinking tonight, Lachlan?
Man, I'm sort of following suit. Actually, I'd say, since I'm in the position between you guys, I'm taking a little bit of advice from column A and column B here. Ooh. So I've actually got a Margaret River Cab Merlot, which is from Aldi, Rubes. You'll be glad to hear. And nice. Despite being cheap, it's actually pretty good. I'm surprised.
I think you can almost describe anything you get from Aldi with that one sentence.
Sure.
Despite
cheap,
being cheap.
Surprisingly good.
That's funny.
What do you got, Rubes?
I finally got myself a bottle of whiskey. It's not from Aldi. I may or may not have skirted the edges of what's legal in terms of browsing rules, but I found a $70 bottle of whiskey for $50. Ooh. So I've got this. I've not tried it before.
Dimple.
Yes. It's a 15-year one, and I'm pleasantly surprised by it. I'm quite enjoying it.
Is that a sort of peated one or not peated?
I don't know, but it tastes peated. It's got that kind of an air to it.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
I don't know whether it actually is. I'm not that advanced in my whiskey tasting.
You need some blue cheese to go with that whiskey.
We have to face the fact that me and you, Tim, we might be the only two people on the planet that enjoy whiskey with blue cheese.
No way. There has to be other people. Surely that's a combination, like cigars and whiskey. It's just cigars, whiskey, and blue cheese. They go together.
Have you tried that, Lachlan?
I have, but I must admit, blue cheese is something I'm only just sort of coming around to. It's I don't love it, but I don't mind it now. And I'm not the biggest whiskey drinker either, for that matter. So I'm definitely sort of more of a bourbon guy. Color me uncultured, but
you Philistine.
I know, right? Well, it's funny because my grandfather was like a dyed-in-the-wool Scotch man, and I don't know. I just went the other way.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So lockdown, how you guys coping?
Yeah, look, hanging in there. It's it's not too bad. I mean, in a general sort of sense, but I think the whole thing is it's just you're just not sure when it's going to finish, and I think that's what's getting to people more than anything at the moment. If you know what I mean. So you can cope on it day to day, but you'd like to know there's an end coming, and given the numbers in New South Wales, it's not coming anytime soon at the minute. So I think that's the main thing.
Yeah, it's pumping up.
How about you guys?
We're homeschool stuff is different. I had some really good success with that with my son particularly over the last week. So it's one of those like real proud parent moments where there was a big task to get done, and you had that sort of man-to-man chat, and he's just lifted and had a crack, and I was really, really happy with that. So we got him got my daughter one too because she's killing it. But whatever Lego order they wanted online, up to a certain amount, we let them get it. And so he got a the Baby Yoda. What's the child called? The Grogu. Whatever it's called. Yeah, he got a Lego Grogu. It's like 19 centimeters high. So he's 15% through building that at the moment. So it's pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, you had a bit of Lego though too, mate.
I did. I've started building it. I got a Saturn V rocket. You might be able to see it in my background. It's below the Assassin's Creed poster with the guys' faces back to back. So we've built the first 2 stages. It looks like it's an inch tall on my screen, but it's already about 8 inches high. It's apparently when it's all assembled, it's about 1 meter tall.
Nice.
So it's almost 2,000 pieces. So It's pretty good. I'm pretty looking forward to it. How
I
about you?
still
Ruben?
maintain that one of the best things about having kids is getting to play with Lego again.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
True. Yeah. We
No,
Oh,
my
sorry.
son got a Volkswagen Combi wagon for Christmas, and he's too little to put it together. He's like, "Dad, can you help me?" I was like, "Are you sure you want me to help you?"
do I?
I think the question you're asking is, do you want to help me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you,
Sorry,
Reese? How
Ruben.
you guys holding up?
Yeah, my week's been all right. I actually finally got some exercise in. I went for a run, did some weights, and it was one of those things where I was like, "Man, I shouldn't have put that off so long because you just feel so much better." I
Yeah.
think I spent so much time sitting down lately. I really needed it, so that was good.
Yeah, great. And are you coping with the whole parenting school teacher nonsense? Or
Oh, I've been putting that on my wife, but the next 2 days it's up to me, so we'll see what happens there.
ooh,
Our local childcare centre where we send our smallest one to is they had a COVID positive case, so they've shut
oh,
down for 2 weeks. So I've got to take Monday, Tuesday off for the next 2 weeks. So we'll see how that goes.
okay. Well, have fun with that. I saw this meme on Facebook. I think my mum put it up the other day, just saying it was like a parent writing a note to the teacher, and it said, "Dear teacher, you lied. My child is not a joy to teach."
Nice.
I was like, "Yep,
Yep.
awesome." All right, well, let's crack on. So this week we're at book 2 within our book, The Republic, that we're reading. Ruben, do you want to do a quick overview of last week?
Yeah, where did we get up to? Basically, Socrates put Thrasymachus down, or wore him down, so to speak. They kind of came to the end of a bit of a conversation, and then we got to the point where they'd made a little bit of headway, but Socrates basically said, "Well, I enjoyed that. I probably enjoyed that a little bit too much, but we still don't know what justice is." And that basically brings us into book 2, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. You kind of described it like a Sizzler's restaurant event. He just started. He went in there to get the prawns, and he got intercepted by the meatballs and spaghetti and the garlic bread
Got
and
distracted. Had to have a bit of everything.
the soft serve. Got to the end and realised, oops, forgot to have prawns.
Yeah, so sort of going into book 2, I think, oh, all right, let's see. I was sort of really wondering where's this going to head, and not in a bad way, but it sort of ended up the next two blokes come along and they just rehash Thrasymachus's argument. So
Yeah.
it's all. It's not. I'm not saying there's no progress, but it kind of feels like they're almost back to square one again.
Well, I think we sort of start off with Glaucon, who's Socrates' mate, and I think he certainly rehashes all of Thrasymachus's stuff.
Yeah.
But Glaucon's brother, he puts a little bit of extra seasoning on it, and I think there's something to be garnered there. So that's all right.
Yeah. No. I really like their attitude. They're like, no. They're like, after this, after Thrasymachus has jumped up and down, carried on, and basically subdued, they've kind of come in and gone, no, that's not good enough. We can make that argument better. They're like, we can make a better argument. We're not done yet. And one of them actually says to Socrates, basically, no. This is what people believe. What Thrasymachus says is what people believe. We want to know. We want to know whether it's true or not. Like, so let's really have a go at trying to figure it out. So I think that's commendable. But that kind of goes back to what you were saying the other week, that their whole attitude towards debate and argument is sort of really open and yeah, well, that sort of gear.
Yeah, it's pretty neat that they could sort of come in and they're really open about the fact they don't support Thrasymachus, and they want it to be proved, the opposite to be proved, right? But they're like, if he's not willing to push it through, we will. And even though this isn't an argument that we want to take that side on, but we'll take the side of the opposition just in order to try and progress this argument. That's a really cool thing.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I think it's cool, but it's also honourable, maybe. Like
Hmm.
they actually value the idea of justice, I think, enough to test it properly. To go, okay, look, yep, that we agree that justice is legit, and we probably end up at the same place that you're at. But that argument wasn't the best argument put forward, and we need to make sure if this is what we think it is, that it will hold up to the highest level of scrutiny. So, and I think they take the scope outside of where it initially started too, because initially they were talking about it like a trade or a I don't know, a skill set, and I think they make it broader than that, which is pretty good.
And it was also like, I think it was this thing about they're sort of like weighing up the benefits of both. Like there's a just tangible advantage, but it kind of, I think they're almost sort of saying like it's making it cheap. Like the way they're talking about it, it's like, oh, you're going to get like 20 gold out of doing it this way and 15 gold out of doing it that way. So that one's better. And I think that was part of the interesting discussion that we'll sort of get onto, I suppose, that they're trying to elevate it to something beyond that, to think about it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think the first hint of that is we're right at the start. Glaucon asks Socrates, well, what kind of good do you think it is? And then he lists 3 categories of goods, which I thought were really interesting categories, and it's not something I'd thought of before.
Yeah.
But he basically says there's 3 types of goods. There's goods that are desired because they're good for their own sake, and then there are goods that are good for its own sake and because of the consequences of that good. And then the third type is there are goods that are painful but beneficial. I've tried to summarize them, but I've probably butchered it.
No, I think you're pretty close, man. I wrote that down as goods that are desirable for themselves, like pleasures, but that doing them doesn't really do anything. And then the second one being goals that are desirable for their own sake, and the consequence is also good. So to me, that's like the sweet spot. It's like it's fun to do, and the consequence is good. And then the third one is it's not fun to do, but the consequence is good. So straight away, what came to mind to me was burpees. I hate burpees. But the consequence of burpees is good because you get healthier. So
yeah, but they are not fun to
yeah.
do.
So to me, it was like you can play Xbox, but there's no good outcome for that. Or you can play virtual reality Beat Saber, so you get to game and you get fitter. Or you can do burpees, which isn't fun, but you get fitter. That was kind of how I thought about it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the first category, because Socrates goes on to say that that's the highest one. That's the best one is goods because they're good for their own sake. Like there's something inherently about it itself that's good. I thought that was interesting because they don't really debate that. They all just agree that here's your categories, and this one's at the top.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily say I disagree with it, but I just thought it was interesting that was just a point that they kind of just agreed on and blew right past.
Yeah,
I think sometimes they do that with these debates, though, because it's like if that's not kind of fundamental to what the debate is, they're happy to accept it as a premise. You know what I mean? Even if it's not like maybe their go-to, if you know what I mean. It's kind of like, I can see that argument. Yep. Okay, cool. Let's move on. Let's use that and move on from there. But it's interesting. I mean, because obviously you had Socrates in this case. He's gone with option one and said that justice should be in category one, and then the other guys have just basically sort of said, yeah, that's interesting that you say that, but no one else says that. Everyone else thinks that's rubble,
yeah, that kind of goes back to what I was trying to explain the other week, that they've kind of got to this point of sophistry where the entire society just basically, well, I mean, the consensus was that, whatever you can persuade people or force people to do, that's what's right. So it's all about, knowledge is all about knowing how to persuade people, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that kind of plays into him just going, no. justice is something that's good within itself, regardless of the consequences, and it's something that should be pursued. And yeah, that's right. These two, the two brothers, Glaucon and I forget the other bloke's name, basically go, yeah, okay, but nobody else believes that.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's where they just sort of make the point is that, that's why we have to push so hard on this Socrates, and we're gonna work you over a bit, because we hear that argument all the time as well, and we want to be able to refute it, and we don't know how to refute it. So we need to work this out so that we can support justice because we think it's right.
Yeah.
Which is admirable.
Yeah.
So going on from there, they basically try and sort of like set the scene, and obviously Glaucon sort of takes up the first, sort of bash at sort of, I suppose, like we sort of saying, like rehashing a bit of what Thrasymachus had really put forward. And he sets through that he's going to sort of lay out three different, a plan in sort of 3 steps to sort of do this, right?
He's much more structured, not like just an emotional lash out like Thrasymachus. Which is good.
I like how he has a dig at Thrasymachus too.
It's totally.
Also.
But he doesn't sort of he sort of has a dig at him, but at the same time he doesn't sort of hold it against him, because he's like, you know what, his view is the same as most people's, so that's to be expected of somebody like that. Perhaps that's a bit of a backwards. But
he's like a snake that got charmed too soon. Like,
that's it. Yeah,
I'm like, wow, call him a snake. I mean, maybe it wasn't as offensive back then, but.
I think he was just saying that he was quite easily influenced. Was the deal that Socrates' words were soothed him like a charm of a snake or something. So that's good.
Yeah, I thought it was good.
So Glaucon's plan. So first he had that listed, talking of the nature and origin of justice according to the common view. So he says. Second, he wanted to tackle. That all men who practice justice do so against their will, because of necessity, not out of good. So that's going back to that thing that Rubes was just talking about before. And thirdly, that this view makes sense, since the life of the unjust is better than the just. So although he doesn't agree with these statements, he's got to really set this out like Thrasymachus. Yeah,
I thought they were really clever and very interesting, particularly on that third point.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree.
So, origin of justice, I think, this is really pretty much a straight up rehash of what Thrasymachus sort of had listed there. More or less is just sort of saying that it's really about what sort of gets made lawful, really. I suppose he does kind of break it down a little bit from there, because he sort of talks about the law being a compromise. So it's not necessarily the best solution, but it allows the people who implement the law to still remain a little bit unjust without punishment, but also they're going to suffer a little bit of injustice, which they may have to allow to be, or they're not able to retaliate through because of the law. So he's just saying it's like an average point between these two things. So it's not perfect, but it's kind of like the lesser of two evils. And he reckons that that's kind of the origin of justice.
Yeah, I really liked that, and that also feels really modern. That idea, I've looked at a lot of stuff around morality over the last few years, and straight away, it made me think about. Have you ever seen the scientist guys that are trying to discover how morality evolves through monkeys?
No.
Yeah,
I think Ruben has, but so the experiment is hilarious to watch. And I don't think it proves morality, but it's funny. It's a funny experiment. So they've got these 2 little spider monkeys, and they've taught them that if they hand the scientist a pebble, that they will get a reward, which can be something like a grape. So, but they've also created a hierarchy of treats based on what the monkeys like most. So grapes are okay. It's like giving a dog a piece of ham. It's not a piece of chicken or a smacko, but it's something that they'll happily eat. So what they do is they put these 2 monkeys in 2 cages side by side where they can see each other, and they get the first monkey to hand the trainer a rock, and then the trainer gives him a grape, and he happily eats the grape. And then the other monkey does the same task and gets given a piece of mango, which is right at the top of their favorite things. And the monkey who did the first one, who got the grapes, sees this and thinks, sweet, I'm going to get mango. And so straight away picks up the rock in anticipation for the sinus coming back. Sinus comes back, monkey hands him the rock and gets given a grape. And it looks at it confused, like, what? And then the other monkey gives them the rock and gets the mango again. And so the monkey throws the grape at the scientist.
He just cracks it.
So then
Like
the
he
scientist gets him to do it a
fit.
third time, gets the rock and hands him, and immediately throws the grape back at the scientist and starts having a tantrum. And I just thought, like, geez, that's funny. But they're trying to show through that behavior that, like, morality can come out of nature. And I'm not sure that that's right, but it made me think about this. Like, this is kind of what this guy is saying, is that, you know, people experience this unfair thing, whether or not they're doing the unfair thing or they're receiving the unfair thing, and they just hate it so much that they would rather compromise and just do a set of rules that people still have a consequence, but you're not the one doing the consequence. You know, the cops do, or the soldiers do, or the governor does. So then it removes that task of you having to, you know, grab your sword and go and take vengeance, and thus corrupting yourself. But it also means the other person can't pick on you and get bullied.
Yeah, it's sort of, you can see it's a bit more sophisticated than what Thrasymachus was saying, in the sense that it becomes something that's functional or agreed on, more so than just enforced. Like it becomes a convention, but it's a convention that's necessary, so to speak. Well, I thought, I really enjoyed that bit too. I thought that was interesting, and I don't know whether I said this the other week, but I've heard the Plato's Republic referred to as basically all of philosophy is just a footnote to Plato. And you can kind of see it starting to come out here, because that idea where he's discussing that idea of justice and the good, it's basically social contract theory.
Yeah.
Which is like an Enlightenment ideal, which was, lauded at the time, but ultimately it's something that they were talking about, way back in the Greek times.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting argument. Before we move on, like, where do we want to go from there? Do we want to spend more time on this point, or do we move to the next one?
Well,
I feel like we've definitely explained it well.
No, the main thing I think of my takeaway from that is he's essentially he's arguing that justice is just a convention.
Yeah.
But with the first point where he talks about how we come to know about justice, and it essentially is due to the society and the way you're taught. For me, my thought was, this is not really an argument for what justice is. For me, they're in turn point 1 and 2. They're basically an explanation of how people learn what justice is, and then reasoning for why they would comply with it. To me, they're not really arguments for what justice is, but they're actually arguments for how you know what they are and why you would do it. That was my immediate thought. I don't know whether he's presenting. Do you think he's presenting it as an explanation for what justice is?
I don't know. Maybe he's just trying to set the framework to build on from there. That it's just kind of, I'm going to start with, this is almost like part of his definition for what we know, because I think he refers to it as like what's commonly understood. You know what I mean? And so he's just trying to start in its most basic sort of understanding for most people. That's how they experience justice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think I'm happy to move on because I'm really excited to talk about the second one.
What do you mean the second brother or the third?
No. His point 2 is it?
The point 2.
Yeah,
people
you look like
practice justice out of the necessity, not good.
Yes. So that statement, once he unpacks it with the story, who's the guy?
Oh, the ring. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, Tolkien borrowed from this, far out. Tolkien's the plagiarist. Watch all my
Pretty
Tolkien
much.
fan mates have a crack at me about that. But like,
No, I think that's totally fair. There's no doubt in my mind that he was aware of this story.
For sure.
yeah, like if you look at the backstory of Gollum, when he does find the ring, have you ever read it, Lachlan?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So how he does go into the village and starts causing mischief.
Yeah.
And I think he does steal some stuff.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, this is super super familiar. this example.
For those playing at home, this is a fable of, I think it was called Gyges or Gyges. I'm not
Yeah, I
not
don't
too
know how to
sure.
say it.
So this is a story about a good-hearted shepherd who basically finds a ring of invisibility, I should say, which might sound familiar, as we're saying.
On some sort of alien or something.
Was
More than
I think
human.
that was the thing. It was inside the, what was it? A
Yeah.
It's like a
statue
hole in the
of something,
ground.
wasn't it?
Well, it said it was
Yeah.
something that was more than human.
That's
Yes.
right. That's
And I'm like, oh, here we go. It's aliens all over again. There's probably an egg in there. Egg starts opening.
Prometheans.
So, in spite of our shepherd being a good-hearted person, and as we would sort of say in our example, perhaps just, he basically works at this ring, can make him invisible, and to use it for his own gain, winds up killing a king, taking his wife, taking his lands, and basically taking everything he can get for himself. So going from being a good shepherd to a thief and a murderer and whatever else just to get his own way.
Yeah, I
It's
like
interesting.
the way that he told that story, and then he's like, "All right, now that you're thinking about that, think about this." And he's like, "If you had two people, a just person with that ring and an unjust person with that ring," and he basically says, "Nobody is going to get that ring and not basically do what Gaijus did." That's essentially his argument, isn't it?
Yeah, and
Or
Absolutely.
I think later on, he basically says, "If you didn't, you're an idiot."
yeah.
Well, he said you're either an idiot or he said you're basically a saint or a god. He said, I don't think any man could do
Yeah.
it. It was, yeah, more or less you must have a bit of godliness in you to be able to withstand the temptation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you liked that bit, did you, Timmy?
I really enjoyed it because straight away my ADHD mind was just like, oh, Lord of the Rings, Alien, like, woo! All these awesome ideas start coming to my mind. And thinking like, oh, is that the point of Frodo? Like, is that the point of why Frodo is like super, super good, but even by the end, he gets corrupted? Maybe there's some ties here.
They actually had a pretty good quote sort of following on from that to just kind of like cement the idea, which was, I'll just read it. Here he is. And this we may truly affirm to be great proof that a man is just, not willingly or because he thinks that justice is any good to him individually, but of necessity. For wherever anyone thinks that he can safely be unjust, then he is unjust. For all men believe in their hearts that injustice is far more profitable to the individual than justice.
Yeah.
So,
I highlighted that bit too, man. I was like, yeah, there it is.
mm,
There's the argument.
absolutely.
It is well stated.
Yeah, because that kind of then pushes into his third structured point, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. The life of the unjust is better than the just.
Oh,
Which
and his
at
analogy.
this point, it's going to be a
cracks
tough
me up.
argument, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and once again, it starts to get a little bit abstract, but I liked how he's talking about, like he's like, if you're acting as a just person just for the praise of it, then it doesn't really count. So he's like, to be a just person, you have to be a just person, but everyone has to think that you're unjust, because otherwise you're not a just person. Like, it's a little bit circular where I'm like, yeah, that's interesting. But then he travels from that and goes, so the person who is just and everyone thinks is unjust, what happens to him? And then they land on, oh yeah, he's crucified. He's he's got his eyes gouged out. He's tortured to death. And I'm like, that's a bit of a slippery slope. It's interesting.
I love the fact that they all agree on that, though. They're like, yeah, that would totally happen.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So I'm guessing their society was a little different. Maybe maybe back then, if everyone in society thought you were an unjust person, that's you were gone. They would just drag you out and torture you to death or something. I don't know.
In fairness, he does sort of precede that by saying, we're going to try and like lay out the most extreme example of,
Yeah.
you know, I think the success of
That's
the
right. There's
unjust
a few disclaimers.
Yeah.
He throws out a few disclaimers. He goes, look, I don't really think this, but this is what people are saying. This is not my ideas.
Yeah.
And
but I think like
you're right,
really that interesting bit you were talking about, Rubes, about like being unjust, but looking like you are just, and basically having that cloak of, or the facade of this like great person who's actually shafting as many people as possible behind the veil of that and getting away with it. And having the means, I think, was the thing they kept talking about, was like, the capability to be able to get away with it, either being able to talk your way out of an argument, having friends that would support you out of a situation, or having the money to bribe your way out of it, or whatever it may well be. But just having the means to basically be an asshole, rip everyone off, and still get away with it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you touched on something there. Like he, particularly with talking about having that success and being that, if you get all of the wealth, well, you can bribe the gods anyway. So
his brother brings that up later.
Yeah, so if you've been corrupt, if you've milked it, but you've got all the stuff, and gods can be appeased by, making some sacrifices, buying a bull, doing all those different things. Build a college dorm for somebody, or build a library or a hospital room.
No,
then you'll be sweet. You'll be sweet.
Bring it into the modern age.
Progressed so far.
Yeah, I think he basically sort of says, the unjust man will get success for himself, will gain friends, and be able to honor them and the gods in better style than the just man will. So therefore, between gods and man, they would all unite in making the life of the unjust better than the just.
Yeah, I like what his brother said about that, because I really like the bit where he goes, well, I mean, what we know about the gods comes from the poets. So either there are no gods and it doesn't matter, or we have to rely on what the poets say. And he's like, and all the poets basically say, you make the right sacrifices and prayers and you're good to go. And he's like, so you've got nowhere to go from here.
Yeah, so this is Glaucon's brother, Adimantus, I think his name is.
Yeah, because he's kind of just adding on to the argument, isn't he?
Yeah, I picture Wolverine whenever I read that word. I just hear adamantium.
Yeah, my one read it too, embarrassingly enough.
He's the best X-Men. He's the most useless one, and he's the best one.
Hey, speaking of, actually remind me at the end. That's my talking point. I just realized what it is. So remind me Wolverine, and
I'll write it down.
So Glaucon's brother just basically sort of jumps into the argument because he thinks that Glaucon's basically done a good job in kind of summarizing Thrasymachus, and he just kind of like wants to throw a bit of sizzle on the end there just to make sure we're really kind of covering it off the argument, I suppose. So he's really talking about that sort of like whole appearance of justice, and starts sort of talking about, how, a child being raised in the world is going to view justice, and that parents may seek to sort of like raise their children saying, to be just is good, and that you should, aspire to try and be this good person, right? And that there's rewards in being just, and that, you talk about the heroes and all the stuff of Greek legend, and, maybe some of this stuff that's sort of, written by the poets, and, the, exalted in the halls of heaven. And actually there was a great one that I had sort of highlighted there, was the story of, was it Messias, who states that the greatest reward for some of the saints was to lie around on couches, feasting and crowned in garlands in immortality of drunkenness. So basically just hanging out, getting pissed forever, that's the highest achievement you could seek.
Wow.
Perpetual
Um,
drunkenness.
yeah. And then, like, obviously, on the flip side of that, they're actually talking about Hades and hell and damnation. So, so to be unjust, like setting this scene for the kids that, there's some morality here that you need to consider, and you should try and live well and do this sort of thing. But he's sort of like throwing this juxtaposition of like we're telling our kids this, but then they're watching what's actually going down, and what's going down is a whole different kind of rap. It's
Yeah, and he basically says the smart ones are going to figure it out.
yeah.
Even he says it at one
uh,
point. He's like, the smart ones will figure it out. Any of them that are paying attention will realize. Just pay the right people, grease the right palms, make the right sacrifices, and what does it matter what you do?
Well, I think that the main sort of thing he's kind of getting onto as well is that, being just is hard. And that's what they're talking about, I think, with like the just man sort of, okay, being a bit extreme there, talking about getting his eyes sort of gouged out and what have you. But they're saying life's going to be hard because if you want to do everything, truthfully, honestly, you're not going to get the best deal. Maybe you need to try and like pave the way with a little bit of black money to kind of like get a deal done, but you won't do that. So everything you do is going to be harder, and whilst it might be the best outcome when you're sort of going to heaven or whatever it may well be, or whatever they're envisaging, you're busting your ass your whole life and having no fun getting there. Whereas go the unjust way, the doors of Vice are open, mate. Jump on in, get into whatever you like. Do this, do that, do whatever, and then pay that money off to the gods, and you're sweet. So you can still go to heaven. You just got to pay that money. It's all good.
Well, that's an interesting point because if justice is just a convention, then there's no reason why you can't just buy it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because they're trying to balance this sort of argument about about what is it, and then I'm not sure if it was actually Thrasymachus or who was it who was speaking before Thrasymachus in book one.
Well, I'll get my notes. Hang on.
I can't remember now, but they were sort of talking about whether you want to. Polymarchus, I think, yeah. And they're talking about whether you really want to teach your kids to be truly just or just to kind of have that veneer. And as you say, I think Adamantus is just sort of saying, the smart ones will work it out, that you just want to look like you're playing the game, but you're actually just out for yourself every step of the way.
Yeah. Going back, winding back a little bit, or the fate of the just man. I do this thing to people that I talk to, and I call it Jesus smuggling. And what it is like, if you're having a conversation about substantial or someone asks for advice, sometimes I open up and I'm like, look, I'm happy to give you my thoughts and tell you what I think, but at some point during this conversation, I'm going to Jesus smuggle you. And what that means is I'm a Christian, so at some point it's going to come back to that. And that really hit home when I was reading the passage about what happens to the unjust man. It says, I'll just read it. I think this is during Glaucon's bit, and he says, this is what the fate of the just man. He says, they will say that the just man, as we have pictured him, will be scourged, tortured, and imprisoned. His eyes will be put out, and after enduring every humiliation, he will be crucified, and learn at least that one should not would not want to be, but to seem just. But basically, when reading that bit, I'm like, that to anybody who's even not non-Christians, anyone that's read the Bible and knows a little bit about Jesus, they sort of hear that bit and it's like, yeah, all right, that sounds really familiar. Just this idea that the truly just person, the world is going to chew them up and spit them out.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. And then when you combine that with what you were saying earlier about them saying the only person who's going to take that ring and do the right thing has got to be a god, because no man can do it.
Yeah.
I just say you take those two things and you tie them together, and then you fast forward a couple of years and you read the New Testament. There's some really interesting links there, I think.
Yeah, man. I was talking to my wife about that today because I was reading that and I was just like, wow. Like, yeah, that's very familiar.
Yeah, some interesting parallel there for sure.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
It just, it makes you wonder. And I think later we're going to talk about what we think Socrates' comeback is going to be.
Yeah.
Trying to anticipate his argument and probably fail miserably. But for me, that's at that first point when you see that kind of synchronicity, it makes me think there's got to be something more to this justice thing than just convention. When you start to see those synchronicities popping up everywhere. But anyway,
yeah,
I'm a churchy too. But as you know, I've listened to many things, and I think what's his name? Isn't that kind of the stuff that Carl Jung was trying to look at as well? Is like meta story stuff. Like in different conversations,
I don't know enough
there's
about
like common themes.
I don't know enough about Jung. I haven't really looked into him. I'm skeptical.
Oh yeah, rightly so.
Yeah,
he had some crazy ideas, but yeah, like I think well, that's what Peterson talks about all the time is archetypes, and that's what Jung talked about a lot is archetypes. So.
They're kind of tapping into the same thing, probably, as what maybe what Socrates was.
Well, I mean, if you know, you're Christian, I'm Christian. If there's a truth, like if something's true, then it'll be
universally true. Yeah.
So you know, I see those things and points to that for me for sure. But
interesting.
Yeah, I had similar thoughts, man. Like, and I was talking about with my missus as I was saying, and it was just. It was a bit trippy. I was like, "Wow, this is really, really familiar," but in a place that I would never expect to read it.
Yeah.
But,
did you want to chime in on that, Lachlan? You don't have to go all religious like we did. Whatever your thoughts are.
Yeah. Look, I guess like I must admit, like aside from thinking about the crucifixion, I didn't sort of draw so much parallels, but I'm not quite so well schooled as you guys.
No, you can sit there and say, "No, you guys are reading too much into it." That's fine. You can say that.
No, look, I could absolutely see the parallels there in the story for sure. But yeah, I think you guys actually put it pretty well, so makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Yeah. Sort of rolling on from that point, we sort of get to like Adamantis, I think, comes to maybe like the crux of what his discussion is. And I guess he's also kind of like throwing Socrates a bit of a bone here. And he talks about, you know, so we've gone through all this stuff where, you know, we're trying to teach our kids the right thing, but they're sort of out in the world and they're seeing what's really going on. And he's sort of saying, you know, maybe we're actually telling the wrong thing to our kids and filling their heads with the stories of heroes, getting glory of basically going to heaven and getting pissed. That's probably not the right message, right? So he's saying, you know, maybe we actually need to talk more about what's the benefit for the soul. And this is really where he kind of like starts to sow the seeds for, I think, well, what I think is probably going to be the argument going forward. So they're saying, you know, we want to sort of rise above what the material benefits are. And, you know, we've had this whole thing with Thrasymachus where we're trying to like weigh up, you know, what's better in life, being just or unjust based on like what a material gain you're going to get out of it, to starting to focus on your soul and what's good for you.
Yeah.
And he's saying, you know, if the soul had been the focus, I think he's got a nice little quote there, something about keeping evil from your hearts and having that as the lesson for the youths, then it'd be the self that manages that evil instead of the law, because you want to be a good person, because you're a moral person, you're a just person, because you understand that is the best way to be. And that's giving you something personally for your soul, not just physical or advancement of some kind.
But they get there because I think they all agree at the end of his argument that the unjust man gets better material rewards.
Totally.
So, and I think that's an interesting outcome, and none of them disagree. Like they all get to that
What do you think? Do you
conclusion
think it's true?
that unjust people get a better material reward.
Yeah, do you think it's true?
Do I think it's true? Gosh,
We're talking about a material reward.
Maybe. Well, let's put it this. Here's an example. Here's a modern day example, right? Every movie I have watched since at least before my children were born, I have paid for. So my whole iTunes library for movies, I've bought every single movie. I've rented every single movie that I want to watch. I've not downloaded, at least that I can recall, any TV shows or movies illegally for at least since before my son was born, which is 12 years ago. Now, if I look at that at a financial level, so my iTunes library has over 100 movies. So let's say that they were, and I'm an impatient person, so I always get them as soon as they come out. So let's say they're $20 each. That's conservative, right? How far behind am I financially from the guy that pirated those movies? I'm thousands out, right?
Yeah.
So
no, you are. Yeah.
yeah. So I would say materially, there's an argument there for that, for sure.
Well, and I think you might want to sort of think about, and I don't want to throw shade at like some of the richest men in the world, right, or women for that matter, but they've probably stabbed a lot of people on the way through to the top, right? But I don't know. You look at it and you think, well, philanthropy, is that the way that they're trying to pay off their debt to society from shafting a ton of people on the way through? It's like, I've made billions and now I'm going to pay something back in to try and like offset the damage I did on the way through.
Is that what you
clear my conscience
earlier,
before I go to an early grave?
Yeah, like
that's pretty.
Pay for a wing of a hospital or.
That's right. I climbed to the top of this mountain on a pile of corpses, so now I need to revive many, many below me to get that going. Balance those scales.
But it's exactly what you see with the original discussion that we had with Cephalus at the start, and he's saying how he can sleep easy as an old man because he's not ravaged by dreams about the people he shafted on his way through to the top, because he didn't do that. Whereas he knows lots of other old men, are bitter and sort of twisted from thinking about or what's going to happen to me now that my day of reckoning might be coming, and we've got to kind of make good on all of those bad things I did in my life on the way through.
Yeah,
so you got to wonder
sort of that unavoidable sense of guilt. I don't want to go on a tangent, but and to hear Crime and Punishment, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So what are your thoughts, Ruben? Like we answered the question. What's your answer? What do you think?
I don't know. I forget what we're talking about.
I just realised I muted myself. About does the unjust person have a better material outcome than the just person?
Oh, yes. I think in aggregate, yes. I mean, you could probably find individual cases here and there where it's not the case. But I think if you're just talking about pure mathematics, like pure cause and effect, in aggregate, yeah, why not? I think they probably do.
Well, there you go. So we agree with these guys.
I mean, there's all sorts of if a man earns $100,000 and spends it on a car, and then the car depreciates, is he got a better material value than somebody? You know what I mean? Like, but you could get into that for hours. I think you just have to accept that somebody who's willing to go that extra mile and step on that extra person and maybe tweak the numbers here and there is going to do better.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah. But, I guess like the question they're trying to lay down is that maybe the just man doesn't, like, because he's getting something else out of it, it's okay. You know what I mean? We don't need to hit the heights of, fame and fortune or whatever it may well be if there's something for the soul. You know what I mean?
Well, I think that's exactly their point. Like, if there is a benefit, it mustn't be material.
Yep.
So what is it? And I think that's where they start going. And
you reckon that's? Well, you reckon that's where Socrates is heading?
Well, that's the thing. So, I intentionally have kept stopping reading at this point because I don't want to stuff it up and get a spoiler. Have you guys
I haven't read
managed
it
to?
either.
Yes, well
Yeah.
done.
Yeah,
I got you.
same. Yeah, I
Oh,
stuck
nice.
to it.
Okay, so we're all in this place of mystery. I just hope it's not like after the Matrix 2, where Matrix 3 came out and I was just disappointed.
Oh, I think I'd have to watch him again.
You know,
that's right.
at, at the time, I was disappointed. I rewatched them this year, and I actually like the ending now. I don't know what's changed in myself, but
We'll
I was like,
we'll save that for another episode.
the ending's actually. I'm actually happy with the ending now. So maybe I should use Star Wars as an analogy. Episode 8.
Yeah.
Like,
I wanted to, I suppose, touch on one sort of thing too, because
Sure.
you know, and we're sort of talking just briefly about like some interesting parallels with Jesus's crucifixion and all that sort of thing, and it's interesting looking at the lens of their society too, based on the structure of gods that they had, because the god system was sort of pretty crazy in ancient Greece because there's lots of them, and a lot of them were pretty fallible kind of people. So it's not like sort of our vision of Christian God. It is definitely of this, you know, these people are murdering, they are cheating on their husbands or wives and doing all kinds of nasty stuff, right?
Yeah,
And
and
that's
there
the
was some
God,
reference, and there
you
was
know?
some reference in there to the poets or the people who are giving the information about the gods as being demigods, as in children of gods, and that sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
it's really quite fascinating. And you can understand their confusion with morality when, and I guess it's hard not to put a Christian lens on it, right? Because from a Christian lens, you sort of have this natural good and evil morality sphere. And I think it's really interesting if you were just in their world and you had all of these gods that you're answering to, and you know, they could be like quite petty and turn on you in an instant, and you know, wreck a good man and, you know, promote a bad man and all this sort of thing. And I just find it interesting that, you know, how can you trust a god or any of these gods who can be bought off with wealth and sacrifice?
yeah. Well, you can't.
Yeah, and whether you've given enough plunder that you've raped and pillaged through your life to buy your way into the good place instead of the bad
Hey,
place.
I loaned
Yeah, I
you
think
season
that's-
1 of Rome, Lachlan. Have you watched it yet?
No, I
Oh,
haven't.
come on.
Been
Oh,
really-
get in there.
Ruben and I love that show.
Yeah,
That show,
that's the best.
that show really targets that issue very, very well several times.
Yeah.
It's a good show. What were
Yeah,
you going to say,
check that
Rubes?
out. I think that's a very, very astute observation there, Lachlan. I had some similar thoughts. It's a very, very good point. And it almost ties in with the whole, well, if justice is a convention, can you buy it? And it's almost like, well, if justice is a convention, can you buy it? And if gods are fallible, can you pay them off?
Good questions. I reckon
don't
we'll find
want
out the
to-
answers next week.
I don't. Yeah, I was gonna say I don't want to upset people, but that idea, because they talk about being able to pay for penance for the dead. You know what I mean? Like basically buy relatives out of Hades, and that's an idea that comes back up again pre-Reformation, which is fascinating that it comes back again as kind of like almost like a warped.
When did that happen? When's pre-Reformation? I'm shady with that.
Like just before, like you know, when Luther comes along and does his thing, and I'm not taking sides on what happened there, but
Yeah.
what all I'm suggesting is that there was a point where there were certain Catholic priests that would take money or other things, and they would tell people, you know, if you pay the right amount, we can get your brother or your sister or your uncle or your auntie out of hell or whatever. Or sorry, it might be out of purgatory.
Yeah. That was similar to some of the messages sent during the Crusade too.
Yeah, that's right. You go and sacrifice your life in this crusade, and you might be able to pay penance for others. Look, that I might be butchering that. So if there are some good Catholics listening and they will want to correct me on it, I'd be more than happy to hear it. But yeah, but
You can enjoy
very interesting that that's a very old idea. It's not a new one, and it's
Mm.
it's resurfaced through the ages.
Yeah, I wonder. Did the I don't know the answer to this, but I might be curious to look it up. But did the ancient Greeks think that they would take whatever fortunes they made in this life through to the next life? Because obviously that was a
Oh, I
fairly
don't
common
know.
thing in the old world.
Yeah, I don't know
I don't
either.
know.
And I wonder if that was like part of their motivation to just like the whole Gordon Gecko greed is good and just you know get ahead as much as you can, right? Because you want to kind of like lay the foundation for your you
For the
know
next life.
yeah.
I'll have
Yeah, I'm
to
not
look
sure
that
about that
up.
one.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Mm.
All right. Well, I think that'll do for Book 2, Part A, or Part 1, for this week. So let's move on to the segment we call the Pub Philosophus.
Imagine a jingle here.
Yes. Insert jingle here.
That's it.
That does sound Greek. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Right. Let's kick it off. So I think this week we were going to talk a little bit about music, but first I'll remind you, Ruben, of the word Wolverine. So what did you want to talk about?
Yeah, just this afternoon, my kids are watching. There's a really old cartoon series of X-Men. I didn't get into it as a kid, and they've sort of been watching it, and I haven't really been enjoying it, just sort of as it's going in the background. But there was an episode with that blue character who can teleport, Nightcrawler, I think his name is.
Yeah, that feels
Anyway,
right.
they find him in a monastery, and he gives this whole diatribe of how he's found God and trusts God despite being persecuted in this world. And then he gets in like this little argument with Wolverine, where Wolverine's like, "I turned my back on God for ages ago. Why would he create a creature like me?" And then Nightcrawler was kind of giving the opposite side of that argument. It wasn't particularly sophisticated, but there are a couple of things that I noticed. I was like, I'm actually really happy to have my kids be exposed to this as a conversation, because it's a really real conversation that happens in real life. And the other thing that occurred to me is, I don't think I've seen a character in popular culture give Nightcrawler's side of the Christian religious concept of reality like that since. Because I heard it on the TV and I'm like, this is really strange. You just wouldn't hear this anymore. So that really struck me, because I'm like,
It's rare.
there are a lot of people out there that sort of believe something or something to that effect, but it's not heard. And I think it's almost like almost not allowed to be made. That argument's almost not allowed to be made in a public sphere. I don't know whether not allowed is the right word, but you just don't see it. Like when you see sort of the Christian worldview in mainstream culture now, it's this really gross, dumbed down, bigoted version that just has no real depth to it. But so it was really jarring just to hear it in this really old I think it's a 90s cartoon. Something that I wouldn't say like it fully resembles a really sophisticated version of Christianity, but just to hear it, that was at least sort of ballpark. I'm just like, that's really interesting. So yeah, that's something I've been thinking about this afternoon. It was very, it was interesting.
I'm racking my brain for other examples, and the first one that came to mind is Older, which is MASH, with the old Catholic priest in that. I used to love his character. Father Mohei or something like that. I can't quite remember.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I used to think he was cool. But there was a very recent example of someone who believed in the Bible as a Christian that was actually quite good. And of all places, it was in Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Oh, interesting.
And spoiler alert, if you haven't played that game, skip forward.
I have, but I haven't gotten to that bit. Should I block my ears for a minute?
Yeah. Skip forward by 30 seconds. I won't say who it is then, so I won't spoil it for you. But there's a character. Usually, obviously, the Templars are the villains in those games. There's a character who is in the Templar organization, let's say, who actually ends up being a legit good person because of their faith. And it was just, I was like, wow, it's so rare to see. I've not, particularly in an Assassin's Creed game where like they constantly sledge, the Catholics and the Templars and all those different Christian denominational variants. It was really surprisingly cool. But I can't think of any other example, Ruben. You're right. Like I'm trying to.
All right, Tim, stop it. Fine, I'll play the bloody game already. Fine.
It is for a long time. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood was my favorite Assassin's Creed game. Valhalla is my new favorite. That's a big call.
I do enjoy Valhalla, but I have to say Odyssey was still kind of like that return to form that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I loved Odyssey.
Yeah,
I will say that Odyssey did the depth of the game a little bit better with the gear and that sort of stuff. I find the gear system not as what's the right word? Not as satisfying in Valhalla. Like I used the same armor set for such a long time because they made it really difficult to level up to a significant level. And the set bonuses were so good. Why would you lose those set bonuses? So it kind of prevented you from wanting to experiment with different armor sets.
Yeah,
until
I know
you
what you mean.
end game. So, but
Alright, so you boys
good.
are going to talk music apparently.
Yeah, you go first, Lachlan. What have you been listening to?
You didn't tell me I had to bring a song of the week. Like,
No, just really randomly, I've been sort of going back to something I used to listen to when I was probably, let's say around about like 18 to 22 or something like that. I was like really into acid jazz, which is kind of like, that's probably a weird term for most people these days. I wouldn't know what the hell it is. But I suppose it was like kind of like new jazz at the time is what it might have been. It's kind of like jazz R&B fusion, I guess you'd kind of call it. So I've been listening to a whole bunch of old stuff that I used to listen to, and it's been loving it. Brand New Heavies, Directions in Groove, who were like a Sydney-based sort of funk jazz band. They were awesome. Incognito, early Jamiroquai sort of stuff. Been having a blast with it. It's been great.
oh, I'm coming up blanks. Jamiroquai, that's a name I know, but the rest of that stuff coming up blanks.
Yeah, you know what? Like it was just kind of like a moment in time, and I was really into jazz and funk, like in the late '90s. So I kind of explored everything that was on the table at that point in time. And there's a lot of like sort of unusual kind of like hip hop jazz fusions that were sort of going on at the time. All kinds of interesting stuff.
Was that like kind of that Cat Empire gear? I remember there was a band. Or was that something else?
That is a little bit something else. But
I like those guys. They're good.
Yeah, no, they're all right. Never mind. But anyway, that's what I've been.
All right.
That's what I've been getting into this week. Oh, just quickly, while we're sort of talking about sort of music / games, I've been playing a new game, but it does sort of feature some interesting music.
Right.
So I'll quickly tackle that one. Art of Rally, which is free on Xbox Game Pass. And it's kind of like a retro sort of low-res sort of, retro rally game, trying to go back to the golden days of like sort of like 60s, 70s, 80s rally. And it features a gloriously sort of 80s electro soundtrack on it, which is awesome.
Mad.
It's
So what was that called again?
The Art of Rally. Art of Rally.
Oh, I'll check that out.
It's only a small
Game
download.
Pass is, for anyone out there, Game Pass is the bomb. Like if you're just like casual gamers, like most of us middle-aged men, like it's great. You can just sort of log on and pick and choose all this stuff. There's new stuff every week. It's great. I love it.
New sponsor, Xbox.
Get in there.
That's how I was playing Microsoft Flight Simulator, which I'm really enjoying too.
Yeah.
So, well, that's a good segue.
Have you got Game Pass, Timmy?
I did sign up for it for a month just to see Microsoft Flight Sim because I didn't want to pay $170 for it. So I decided
For
to
something
go.
that you'd muck around on and probably never go back to.
Yeah, so the first thing I did was fly from Sydney Airport to my house at like 500 feet. And then, went to Paris and a few other places. And that's been pretty cool. I was trying to find some Mayan ruins, but I couldn't find them. They might not actually be in the game. I'm not sure if they've bothered with those, but I was definitely in some pretty mad looking mountains over there, but couldn't find the right place.
I think they're releasing the new Horizon's going to be on Xbox on Game Pass free of charge November.
Mad.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
We'll have to do it. We'll have to do a stream when that comes out. We'll have to figure out how to do a streamed episode of that.
That'd be good.
Timmy, start working on the tech now.
All right, I'm on it.
Sorry, back to music. What have you guys been listening to?
Well, I've, I love game soundtracks, so I've got every Assassin's Creed game soundtrack there is. But one of the guys who does the Valhalla soundtrack, he's got two other bands, and they do like it's like a cross between metal, rock, and Norse folk music. It's really weird stuff. And I've been getting into their album. It's called Runaljod Ragnarok, and it's mad. The first song is called Tear, and it just sounds like you're going into war. It's the best soundtrack to do weights to. Like, it's mad. It's just like all these men going like, Tear! Ooh! It's awesome. So I'm really enjoying that guy's stuff. I've listened to it a lot lately. So yeah, I'm digging it.
Yeah.
Are you
What do
listening?
you reckon the best
Yeah.
game soundtrack ever has been?
Oh, that's a massive question. I'm gonna say that probably my favorite game soundtrack is Doom, as in the newer one. The music in that is epic. I think Mick Gordon was the guy that made that stuff. It is so good. It's proper metal though, like proper stuff. It's good. Yeah.
How about you, Ruth? You got any fave?
Oh, I'd have to give it some thought. When you say game soundtrack, for some reason, Red Alert 2 is what pops to mind.
Yes.
That intro song, it's still burned into my mind somewhere.
How about you, Lachlan?
Actually, speaking of games and music, another game on Game Pass called The Ascent. That's got a really good meaty electronic kind of 80s vibe synth soundtrack on it, and it kicks in every time the violence starts, and it's like, yeah, this is
nice.
So check that out. That's a co-op game too if you guys want to try that out one night.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Yeah, my fave game soundtrack, it's going back a little ways. This is kind of like late 90s PC game called Interstate 76, which was set in the the 70s fuel crisis, and in the US, and it's just like heavy 70s funk, and it is glorious. I still
build mad cars in that. Yeah, that was good.
There's the mad cars in there, and I bought the pack that came with the soundtrack, and I still have it, and I still listen to it every now and then.
Oh,
seriously.
Dude.
Yeah,
you're bringing back some memories. They need to remake that game.
It was so good. I loved that game. I loved it.
Yeah. Actually, I'm changing my mind for favorite soundtrack for music. It's the Destiny soundtrack. I have it on vinyl. Paul McCartney helped write that soundtrack. It is amazing. It is so good. So yeah, that's it for sure.
Interesting.
All right, well, we should wrap it up there. Thanks for joining us tonight, everybody. We hope that you've enjoyed the show. You can find us on Spotify, Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts. We'd love to get you to visit our website, which is www.therepublicofmam.com. And remember, the Republic wasn't built in a day, and neither are middle-aged men. And we'll see you next time. Good night, guys.
Thanks, boys. Always good to
chat. Catch you next time.